Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to review Pathfinder's Advanced Race Guide, the latest book I have read from the Pathfinder line. And if you will indulge me for just a moment, so much crunchy goodness. This is a lot of stuff to cover, and I'm going to try to skim it as quickly as possible. There are races in here that I've never heard before. I already read through them once, so I'm going to have to actually flip to those sections to try and jog my memory a little. The book covers the core races, introduces some details for some of the classic races that have existed as NPCs in the past, and have been interpreted by many different GMs as PC races, and then it introduces some races that I've never heard of before. I have no idea where they came from, since I have not read all of the Pathfinder adventure paths. I think I've only read one or two. I'm not really into the adventure paths, so it's kind of interesting. But we start out with, of course, the classics: dwarf, elf, gnome, half-elf, half-orc, halfling, and human. Each one has a section on the stat block that they have always had. They are going to give you racial traits, alternative racial rules, racial archetypes, and new racial rules for each and every one of the core races. Now, the alternative race things, for example, is that you don't have dwarven stability, but instead you have the ability to be acclimatized to high altitudes because your dwarven clans are from a high mountaintop. That kind of thing. You're swapping one ability for another ability. And one thing I liked about this is that they give a fairly decent number of alternative racial abilities for each of the core races. They then, after that section, they package them in little sections. So, for example, if you wanted an Arctic dwarf or something, and they would say, okay, you can interpret some of these abilities to create that subrace. So each one gets a little subrace section. I mean, it's like only 2 or 3 of them, but it gives you an idea of how you can take these alternative racial abilities and package them to create a type of dwarf that fits your campaign specifically, or a niche in your campaign specifically. Though let's face it, we probably don't need more varieties of elves. And there are going to be interesting things in every section. There are going to be magic items specific to a race. There's going to be spells specific to a race. And the core races get the most options and the most meat for them. As you go, and some of these races get more powerful, you have fewer and fewer options, which is kind of helps to balance them out a little bit. But some of them are definitely going to be much more powerful. And you can gauge this power level in a later section, which I will get to. Some of the things I did enjoy, for example, under the Elven section, they introduced plant companions as opposed to animal companions, which I thought was a great idea, very flavorful. I really like this idea, not just for elves, but I think there are a lot of instances when having plant companions might be a nice option for druids specifically, but at rangers as well. I mean, how about a constricting vine? That's a cool concept. Someone walking around with a vine wrapped around their body that just slithers off of them and towards the enemy. That's cool. And there are going to be some of the classic tropes, like some of the racial things for gnomes are all about tinkering with stuff, and they have that kind of iconic concept. The half-orc section had a nice feat. Almost all these sections have feats as well. A feat which allowed half-orcs to get a bonus when they charge forward in a group, kind of emulating that mob tactics that the orcs are known for, which I quite liked. In the human area section, it also had a fair amount of detail, which was nice. They weren't ignored because they're just the bland humans. They still gave them as much attention as the other races, which was a nice touch. And one of the abilities that for that particular race is, if you purchase this feat, and remember, humans get a bonus at first level, when you level up and you stick to your primary class, your chosen class, you get both a +1 hit point and a +1 skill rank. That's a must-have if you are adhering to the skill ranks that the core rule says lots of classes have, because lots of classes only have 2, which is, to my mind, absurd. No class should have less than 4 skill ranks. And that is a house rule I apply, but that's just me. But if you're playing a wizard, and you're gonna be tapping into that skill rank, that's gonna be your choice. You take this feat, and you're getting a bonus of 20 hit points by 20th level. That is huge for a wizard. That's a nice option. Okay, then we get into the less common, possibly slightly more powerful, but not necessarily more powerful races. Aasimars, which is the celestial humans, essentially, and some nice detail about how to play them in your game. Catfolk, your classic humanoid cats, which, I think every game needs. I'm into anthropomorphic races, always have been. Dompiers, which are half undead creatures, which is a nice touch if you have people who want to have harkening back to Vampire the Masquerade. Here you go. The Drow, classic race. People have been loving and hating them since Gary Gygax helmed the game. Fetchlings, which is our Chateau Plain tinged humanoid race. Goblins, the interpretation that Pathfinder gave them, so they have a new, fresh look. It's not just the classic goblins that D&D's been using since the 70s. This is the Pathfinder version, which is nice. Lots of details on how to play them. Hobgoblins, Ifrits, Fireplane tinted humanoids, kobolds, orcs. Now, under the orc, they have what is called a paragon stat bonuses, which they get a +4 to their strength, but a -2 to all of their mental facilities. So -2 intelligence, charisma, and wisdom. And while I can justify in my head charisma and intelligence, I have a hard time saying why orc should have a -2 wisdom and why they don't have a +2 con. That's how I interpret orcs. Physically powerful, tough, dumb, and not charismatic, but they're not particularly unwise. That's just how I do it. Maybe orcs in my game are slightly more powerful than the standard orcs. Orieds, which are earth-touched humanoids. Rat folk, again another anthropomorphic animal race. Sylphs, which are the classic fays. Tengus, the bird people. Tieflings, the demonically touched humanoids. Undines, which are the water-touched elemental race. Now, the Tengus have a glide ability. They're not very good at this. There's a number of races in this book that have glide ability. A number of these races, they have what they are saying it's a 1-to-4 glide ratio, which means for every 4 feet of vertical drop, you get 1 foot of horizontal drop. That is not a glide. That is falling with style, and that bugs me. I think that you should have at least a 1-to-1 ratio, and that's still a 45-degree fall, folks. That is not great. That's how I would interpret it. Particularly because later in the book, under the Gripples, which is a frog race, some of them, one of the racial features you can get is big hands that allow you to glide, feet and hands that allow you to fly like flying frogs do in our world. And they have a better flying ratio than some of the creatures that have wings, which makes 0 sense to me. And then there's another ability at the end of the book which gives the glide ability, which is an actual glide ability, which is a 5-to-1. So for every foot of vertical drop, you get 5 feet of horizontal drop. That is a glide. I think the glide abilities should be a little more favorable than they are in the game. It's something I question. Okay, then we're going to get into a section I'm going to have to pass to because I'm not going to remember all of the abilities. And remember, folks, hate sucks. Part of a YouTube project. Changelings, which are, again, the classic kind of thing. Changeling that were really introduced fully in the Eberron setting. The Durgar, which is a deep dwarven race, which have the ability to make themselves large once a day, which I always thought was kind of cool. Gillmen, which is a race that have been touched by the Aboleth, and maybe they have the taint of the Aboleth still in their veins. As the name implies, they can breathe water. I kind of like this race. It has the wonderful Lovecraftian feel, very well done. The Gripples, which is a frog race, as I mentioned. The Kitsune, a Japanese fox people, which is very nice. I've always been fans of Kitsune, particularly the very powerful ancient ones that have 9 tails. Merfolk, which are, again, the classic underwater race, which is now fully playable. The Nagage, maybe, I guess. It's a humanoid race based on bloodline of the Naga, the human-headed snake creatures inspired by India. And they have a nice alternative class ability in here where if they're druids, they can become better and better at becoming real Nagas, which is also very nice. The Samsarins, which are a very otherworldly race of humanoids where they keep being reborn, and they have shards of the past running through their minds, and they die and they're reborn, they die and they're reborn, never quite being the same person twice. So it's a really good, has a nice 19th century gothic horror feel to it, something that right out of Ravenloft, for example. I quite like them. The Strix, which is a race of winged kind of harpy-like creatures, which I thought was kind of cool. It's always nice to have flying creatures as an option in your game. The Sulis, who are touched by the Jan, the genies, so they have an ability to tap into their kind of elemental aspects of their past, which I thought was cool. I can never say this, the Slifraneblin, which is the deep gnome race, which is a weird word. I've always liked them as the way they're described, but I've never been able to say the word. I've heard it, I still can't say it. The Vinaras, which are a monkey-based race. Now the Vinaras, I have to really disagree with. They're supposed to be monkey-based race, and yet in their stat block, they forget to put in their climb rate. Even though they reference the climb rate in the text of elsewhere in their entry, they forget to put it in the stat block. So that's bad editing, folks. And the picture gives you an impression of this very cute, adorable, monkey-like race, which is cool, which is what they are. Cute, adorable, monkey-like race. But their stats are +2 dex. Perfect, got no problem with that one. +2 wisdom. Okay, maybe, and a negative charisma because they're so mischievous. What GM is going to make their make the person playing the character be so mischievous they bug the crap out of the rest of the group? And if you're playing a cute monkey type person, I would think that those stats should be reversed. +2 dex, +2 charisma, -2 wisdom. That they're just mischievous and easily distracted, and they can't focus, and ooh, look, it's shiny. That kind of a behavior. I completely disagree with those stats. I think that they did that wrong, and that's just the way I feel about it. The Vishkanyas, which are a race, I'll give you a picture here, a race of snake-based humanoids, which have literally venomous blood. I kind of like that idea. They were interesting, and they had a nice, mysterious, oriental feel to them, if you will. The Wayangs, which are a small dark fey race, sort of like evil, Undine court kind of thing, Unseelie court rather, kind of thing. And I didn't feel the connection. I don't know what the reference is, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I just moved on. Just didn't do it. Then we get into the section in here, which I think is the best part of this book, and that is the race builder. This is a system for building your own races. They give all kinds of abilities, from stat blocks to racial characteristics and such, and they give them point values. And then based on the number of points that you want to assign for a race, I'll tell you what level they are. You have a standard race, which is going to run in the 1 to 10 race point range, and you're going to have traits per category, and they break the categories down, how many traits you could have per category for that race. Then you're going to have advanced, which are going to be at 11 to 20 race points, and then monstrous, which is going to be 20 plus. So basically, build the race you want, and it will fall in one of these categories, and then you could change it to push it into a category that you would like it to fall into, in case you don't have races that powerful in your game. And this, what nice section about this is, in this section, they give you a little thumbnail recipe for a race on every page spread. So every 2 pages there's one of these races. There are centaurs in here, and it's just the formula they used for creating the race. There's nothing else about that race really. So the GM is left to fill in all the details, which is fine. But it shows you how you can build them. For example, you could use the centaur recipe they give right here to build a Wemmick if you wanted to. They're going to be interesting and cool in my book. The Drider is in here. The Gargoyle, which I thought was a nice option. The Knoll, which is cool, and the Knoll is a perfectly playable race, well within the standard core race power levels. Lizard Folks, again, within the power levels of the other races. The Ogres, obviously, a little more powerful. The Gathlan, which is a small fey race who have wings that are made out of plants. That was a nice touch. I thought that was kind of cool. The Kashatha, a humanoid race with 4 wings. The Trox, which is this huge, monstrous, kind of just straight out of anime kind of a creature with these little arms dangling under its chest, and bred as warriors and as guards and as, pit fighters and things like that, which that was kind of cool. The Wyrwood, which are a small race of constructs that were designed to be a wizard's assistants until he gave them free will. Mistake. And the Wyvara, which is a race of kobolds which have been bred with wyverns. I thought that was quite interesting. And at the end of the book, which I think the most useful thing to your person going to use that race builder, is the recipes for all the core races. And yes, dwarves have more RP points than any of the others. Yes, it is true. They are more powerful. And then, of course, all the other races they covered in this book have formulas in here as well, the recipes for creating them. So you could then use them as templates to figure out how you want to tweak them or change them, or base races of your own. This book has a lot of meat in it. And unfortunately, a lot of it is sameness. For example, a lot of the class, alternative class features that you get, bonuses you get if you stick to that class and you don't multi-class, they're a lot of the same from race to race to race. Like X bonus to this class per level, and I understand why they did it, but when I was reading it race after race after race, it really started to just blend together. But it makes perfect sense. I'm not saying they did anything wrong, just that when you're reading it all at once, it does kind of blend together on you. Now, if you are into Pathfinder and you like races, this book is a must-have. I had actually considered buying a third-party race-building product, which the name escapes me at the moment, and I didn't get around to doing it, and now I'm glad I didn't, because I don't need it. I've got it right here. With this book, I can build any kind of race I want to, and I am contemplating building one as an example in another video. This is running way long as it is. So, if you like Pathfinder, and you want to see how the races break down in comparison to each other, even if you were only ever going to use the core races, this book has options that you and your players are going to like. It will let you as a GM tweak those races to make them unique to your campaign, which is always good. And you're going to be able to do it in a consistent manner. Yes, people are going to say that foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, and I am guilty of that. Perhaps that is true, but I like consistency. At the same time, I'm not a slave to balance. So, maybe that cognitive dissonance in my head is why I'm insane. But go forth. Get this book. It is worth your time and your effort and your money, and I recommend it highly.